Okay, everybody out there in YouTube land, I wanted to do a quick run through of the 5-0 list that I trophied with last night. This is our Texas style Jund Shadow, where bigger is better, going a little bit over the top of like traditional Jund Shadow lists. As you can see, we've got copies of things like 3 Wrenn and 6 in the main, 2 Croxa, 3 Seasoned Pyromancer, 2 Liliana the Veil. Just to try to really emphasize that like ability to outgrind opponents, to play more 2-for-1s, more catch-all answers, maybe more ways to dig through our deck. Wrenn and 6 kind of helps get the mana going, so we can Season Pyromancer more often, double spell more often, get back Croxa. In the sideboard, we've got things like 2 Turok's been pretty standard, 2 Ancient Grudge, a little bit different, 2 Alpine Moon, a Kolaghan's Command, 3 Terminate for like the Murktides and big stuff like that, a Grist the Hunger Tide for the go long games, 1 Engineered Explosives, 3 Soul Guide Lanterns. So we're gonna show a little bit of the gameplay of this style of Jund Shadow, which again, this is more like I want to fight against blue-white control, 4-color pile, the mirror, anything like that, where I think the game's not getting decided in the first few turns, and I want to set myself up to really be able to like play that late game. If you're looking for the hyper aggressive like anti-combo build of Shadow, this does get to keep a lot of those elements. You get Thoughtseize, Shadow, Goyf, Ragavan, you get Teamer Battle Rage, only 1 copy, but you can still have those like explosive draws of Fetch Shock Thoughtseize, Fetch Shock Shadow, Fetch Shock Bolt Myself, Battle Rage, something like that. But no Street Wraiths in this list, so you're really not setting yourself up to have like a really big Shadow attacking on turn 3. You kind of take away the ability to have that like oops turn 3 kill. You're probably not killing on turn 4 very much, but hopefully you should be able to get to the mid to the late part of the game with a little more resources intact. So let's go ahead and start throwing up some of these matches. Let's see a little of how this deck actually plays out. Because again, sitting here talking about it is great. Actually showing it is even greater. So let's go. This is game 1 of match number 1. Lose the die roll, which I know y'all are probably sick of me talking about. It's such a big deal in Modern to win the die roll. Opening hand. We've got 3 castable cards, and with a fetch land, we could have Tarmogoyf and Inquisition online. But I'm on the draw. I really don't want to play this Ragavan into like their open mana if they're a red deck or a potential like Wrenn and 6 or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and ship this back. Second hand is not great, but I think it's better. Our mana develops a little more consistently. We've got a redraw. We've got some stuff to do. I'm just going to end up throwing back the basic mountain, I believe. I'm on the draw and I've got a bauble, so I feel pretty confident that I'll be able to find the 3rd land. So we've got Elves, it looks like. Not a great matchup for Shadow. Alright, so I bauble myself there because if I see a removal spell on top, I want to shock. If I see anything else, then I want to just conserve my life total, play a tapped land. The Bloodstained Mire on top means that we are going to get to play out something on turn 2, like a Tarmogoyf if we want. And since Tarmogoyf outsizes everything on their board right now, they could hit a Lord, but Tarmogoyf can still block like a Llanowar Elf or a token or something if they decide to attack out. But it looks like we've got a company. So fingers crossed, and our opponent does whiff here with double Llanowar Elves. So all we got to do is worry about like Lord effects now, Shaman of the Pack, anything like that. But if we can dodge some of those, then we could be in good shape. So, options here. I could go for Liliana, tick up, get the last card out of hand. But I don't think that's really worth it. Like, if their last card's another company, it's a little bit bad. But if they kept a hand that was just, like, relying on that company there, and maybe their last card is another, I don't know, Dwynen's Elite or something, then I feel a little bit better. But I think I would rather Spyro, ditch a couple of these dead cards like Croxa, Liliana, and try to find some spot removal so that I can deal with any sort of Lord effect. Unfortunately, we do not find spot removal, but now we do have the board a little clogged up, so we can at least start, like, representing blocks, protect ourselves a little bit. Basic Forest off the top is really good for us. Archdruid a little scarier. So they're going to ship in with the entire squad, so I'm just going to, like, take as many trade-offs as I can here. Try to clear up the board a little bit. So we're still at a reasonable life total. I still have a shadow. Those draws were fantastic. Like, drawing Tarmogoyf off the bobble, Bolt off the draw for turn, means I get to play double threat and, like, Bolt the Archdruid. And honestly, I can't ask for much more there. Like, I get to shrink their entire board. I get to put a lot of pressure on the battlefield on my side. So, Goyf, Shadow, and we're going to go ahead and main phase bolt this Archdruid so that they can't get the mana on their turn. It would be horrific if they draw and play something like a Realm Walker, and they just get to float all of this mana in response to my bolt. So, I want to go ahead and get that off the battlefield as soon as I can. Alright. So, they go down to no cards in hand for this Clan Caller. They can start activating this next turn and just, like, double up Lord effects. So I do need to be a little aggressive. I started to, like, escape Croxa here and then realized, oh, I don't want to escape Croxa because it's going to shrink my Tarmogoyfs. Like, based on the graveyard, I can't escape Croxa without exiling either Planeswalker, my artifacts, what was it? Creature, sorcery, any of those. Or creature instant. So, if I'm going to attack him with the Tarmogoyf, I want to attack him with them first. End up attacking with stopped up. End up attacking with one Shadow and one Goyf. The reason behind this was I could attack all out and force 2 chump blocks. So I was thinking if they chump block like a Dwynen's Elite on one and like an Elvish Mystic or the Warrior Token on another, then I'm putting myself in a position where my opponent can just like top deck a Lord and I could be in a lot of trouble. Like, I don't know if they play Elvish Champion, but they can top deck that and kill me. They can still top deck that and kill me with this line. But I was kind of hoping that my opponent might, like, respect Battle Rage a little bit more and just throw a creature in front of both of them. They did not throw one in front of the Tarmogoyf, though. So, Battle Rage would have been lethal. Either way, we're just going to escape Croxa here. Put our opponent down to 2. Now we've got 4 lethal attackers plus a Croxa trigger. They draw something dead, so we get out of game 1 with a win, which is huge. Like, game 1, we've got a very low % against elves in the blind. If you know you're against elves, you can kind of keep a hand that's a little better. A little more spot removal. So, let's talk sideboarding against elves. So, some of the easy cuts are like 2 Liliana the Veil. It's never going to down tick and hit what you want to hit. So, if it's not removing a specific piece, I don't think it's really worth having in. The Ragavans are a little hit or miss. Like, they're likely not connecting, but at the same time, anything that trades with an opponent's elf is a positive step. It gets a lot worse when they have like War Master and like can start making elf tokens every turn, because those are gonna trade with the Ragavan all day long. So like if I don't have a Ragavan turn 1, I really don't want to have a Ragavan. But on turn 1, it can be pretty decent. And in a hand like this, I could ditch it to Spyro if it turns out to be dead. But the rest of the sideboarding is I'm bringing in the 3 copies of Terminate, because I really want to answer like anything that could potentially go big and make my life a little bit difficult. Bringing in the Kolaghan's Command. Again, it's just a spot removal spell, and anything that lets me spot remove is pretty nice. And then the 1 copy of Engineered Explosives, because go wide token deck, go wide 1-drop deck. I want to be able to answer as many things as I can. This hand's pretty good. I've got Bauble to try to find more removal. I've got a piece of removal. I've got a Thoughtseize for like a Collected Company, something similar. So drawing the 2nd spot removal spell means I'm really likely to just fire off one of these on the Elvish Mystic. And then we see 3rd spot removal spell on top. So now I'm like guaranteed firing this off. And this is absolutely perfect for me. Like, my opponent playing out a 2-drop means I get to leverage my mana advantage over them. I've got 5 1-drops here, so I get to double spell before the elf deck does. So we're just going to start chipping away at the hand. We see they don't really have anything too scary. They've got like the Archdruid and Shaman of the Pack, but I get to double spell again next turn. So like if they play Archdruid here like they do, I can just bolt plus Ragavan. And now if they play Shaman of the Pack, like I'm going to offer up the trade with the Ragavan. But they play this Llanowar Elf, and I'm just going to offer up the trade again. Like if they want to trade with the Ragavan, like it just makes the Shaman worse. But then I forget that they have Pendelhaven, so they're actually able to just like eat the Ragavan, which was a bit of a punt on my part, especially when they drew Collected Company as their last blind card. So now we're at the mercy of a Collected Company. I couldn't have gotten the Llanowar Elf off the field anyway, so I don't feel too bad. Like that Ragavan was really dead at this point anyway. I could have used it to like ditch to a Spyro, but if I wasn't playing the Ragavan that turn, I wasn't doing anything. And Battle Rage off the top is like S tier draw, because now we're potentially setting up lethal if our opponent gets a little too chippy with their creatures. So I did not realize at first that Elvish Champion actually says other elf creatures get Forest Walk. I thought it was like all of your elves get Forest Walk, including itself. So when my opponent plays this Archdruid, like I almost scooped right here. Because I was like, oh yeah, this is 11 damage. I can't kill anything. I can't block anything. Then they only attack with those 2. And I finally read, oh, Elvish Champion does not give itself Forest Walk. Cool. We'll go to 2 gladly, because now if you don't block, you're dead. Finding the fetch land means they have to double block to not be dead. And if they double block, then I can play out the play this out, fetch off this to a swamp, play Spyro, ditch both of these, try to draw some more removal, but I just get 3 bodies on board. So, like, if they double block to survive, then I still get to gum up the ground. If they don't double block, then I just get to kill them. And they don't block at all, so I Battle Rage. And that is Elves down in round 1. Let's see. Round number dos. Again, losing the die roll. Not doing great on those. But hand's fantastic. Like, we've got Ragavan if we think our opponent's playing something unfair and Ragavan's going to live. We've got Inquisition into Goy for Inquisition into Ren if they're playing a fair deck. So, a lot of bases covered off this. Opponent plays Conflagrate. Crap. Dang. Dredge, like, historically one of the worst matchups for Shadow of any sort. They've got Conflagrate to just wipe away all of your, like, cheap dudes. They've got Creeping Chill to start draining you out. So if you get too aggressive with Shadow, they can just flip over a couple Creeping Chills and end the game on the spot. They've got chump blockers for days with, like, Narcomoeba and Stinkweed Imp, all that stuff. So we got to be pretty careful here. Seeing Narcomoeba on top is actually really good for us because that means that they're not dredging over it with this Conflagrate. We could play out the Ragavan, but that's just giving them, like, a free target to kill our Ragavan, hit us, ditch the rest of their hand. So we're going to go for the Inquisition instead, which we get a little rewarded seeing the Thrilling Discovery. So hopefully this will slow their hand down a little bit. We can, like, find some gas here. So they could Conflagrate us for a bit, ditch their hand, which we're really okay with. It was like everything they do to hit us gets a little bit closer to Shadow. And now we have the opportunity to, like, play out our Shadow. We can hold up Bolt ourselves. I talk about it a lot when we play this deck on stream or any Shadow deck on stream. The way that you beat Dredge with a Death Shadow deck, especially pre-board, is Shadow plus Battle Rage. Tarmogoyf plus Battle Rage is too slow, not as explosive as you need it to be. Ragavan's going to get stonewalled a lot. Like, you really need specifically Shadow and Battle Rage. So all I'm trying to do here is set that up so, like, I can get in a little bit of chip damage here. I think the likelihood of my opponent both hitting double or triple Creeping Chill off the Dredge, or hitting, like, Ox of Agonis into triple Creeping Chill is pretty low. So I'm just trying to get, like, the most chip damage I can get without having my opponent just, like, get a free oops, I win turn. It's like, I don't want to bolt myself here and then my opponent, like, Creeping Chill me off the Dredge like they do here, have a draw spell, get another Creeping Chill, and just get a free win. Like, they're going to have to hit triple Creeping Chill in this one turn if they're wanting to kill me. So, now we kind of feel like we've got it locked up. I've got Ren to get back the land. I've got Battle Rage to grow to double strike the Shadow. They've got a Golgari Thug in their hand, so if they did happen to pick up a Forgotten Cave, then that could be relevant, but they've been dredging Life from the Loam over and over again. So I know they don't have a Forgotten Cave. They haven't gotten one back out of the yard. But here we're just going to go for the Battle Rage kill. And we would have Lightning Bolt still if they had had something else. Like if they had found a Creeping Chill off Forgotten Cave or something. We could either bolt ourselves to deal more. We could bolt them. Obviously not if they Creeping Chill. But just options that we have available. All right. So game 2, sideboarding. A lot of what you would kind of expect. Like, I'm absolutely bringing in the 3 copies of Soul Guide Lantern. Bringing in the 1 copy of Engineered Explosives just to try to, like, clear out Narcomoebas and things that might be chump blocking and slowing down my clock. Boarding out the 2 copies of Liliana the Veil. It's slow. It doesn't do what I want to do. It's just giving them free fuel in the graveyard. Boarding out the 2 copies of Unholy Heat, or 2 of the 3 copies. Spot removal, traditionally not very good against Dredge, since they're either A, getting everything back, or B, they just have too wide of a board for a single spot removal spell to really do much. So 2 Lily, 2 Unholy Heat for 3 Soul Guide Lanterns and an Engineered Explosives here. Alright, so opening hand has got our Battle Rage, really great if we find Shadow. It's got Grave Hate. I've got a couple bolts so I can like get aggressive with my Shadow. Kroxa is a decent pair up with Soul Guide Lantern, so I think I'm going to keep this. Like, Kroxa by itself, pretty awkward when you make your opponent ditch something that they want, but when you can pair it with the Soul Guide Lantern and just make them like ditch something they want and immediately follow it up with Soul Guide that thing away, it's pretty nice. So we're going to decide if we want to fetch or not fetch. And I thought about playing the Soul Guide Lantern here, but I really don't want to open it up to like a portable hole or something like that. And I get a little bit rewarded here because opponent goes for the second main phase, Otherworldly Gaze, which I talked about it with some people in the Discord. It is correct. Like, I recognize that it's correct because if you hit like Narcomoeba Prized Amalgam, you want to get back that Prized Amalgam at the end of my turn so that you can start attacking on yours. But the bright side for me is my opponent just like gives me a Soul Guide Lantern target, and I am A-okay with that. So now we're getting into like Cathartic Reunion turns. Looks like Thrilling Discovery. So unlike Cathartic Reunion, Thrilling Discovery doesn't make you discard until after the spell resolves. So you can't like sack Soul Guide Lantern after you've paid the cost for Thrilling Discovery like you can with Cathartic Reunion. So they did Stinkweed Narcomoeba. Stinkweed dredges over a Dark Blast, which in turn dredges over double Creeping Chill. So I see Ox of Agonis, double Creeping Chill. To me, that's enough to make me fire off the Soul Guide Lantern. Like, prevent 6 points of life drain. Prevent them from having an Ox of Agonis next turn. And I know they've got, like, a Dark Blast in hand and a Stinkweed Imp, which I don't really care about either of those. So, we'll bobble ourselves. We see Tarmogoyf. Decide to keep that because it's something that I can put on the board and attack with. And at the end of the day, like, things I can put on the board and attack with are pretty positive. This was a little bit of a, I guess, controversial line. Like, my thought process here was I want to get Kroxa in the yard in case I draw a fetch land or land next turn. I can just escape the Kroxa. And, like, Kroxa plus Battle Rage plus this double bolt is a pretty substantial amount of damage. The alternative would have been to just hard cast the Tarmogoyf here. But my thought was, if I cast the Tarmogoyf here, then even if I draw land next turn, I can only do the front half of Kroxa. I can't escape it. And I think the escaping part gives me a little bit better of a clock. Like, if they did not have a Dredger in the yard there, I would 100% hard cast the Tarmogoyf. But because they had a dredger in the yard already, I felt like casting the Kroxa was a little bit better. Like, they're already going to get to dredge. Do I really care if their dredge is like 1 or 2 more? And then hardcast Stinkweed Imp is ironically really good for me here, because it does mean that they're not pressuring me. Then Ren, get back, so we can play Tarmogoyf. And this is the kind of spot that I really enjoy having Ren and 6 in the deck for. Being able to keep hitting my land drops without actually needing to draw lands. So now I'm getting to where I can like double spell pretty aggressively without having to go crazy with my life. Or not with my life, with my draws. Like, I don't need to draw lands plus spells. I can just draw spells. And I could have gotten back another land and fetched again with Ren. But I wanted to start pinging them. Like, I'm at the point with Lightning Bolts and Battle Rages that I'm going to be trying to present lethal with this Kroxa like next turn. So I don't really need more lands. I've got my 4 mana for my 3 spells already. Like, I just want damage here. So if this was a Life from the Loam, it means they do have to take a couple extra points of damage with Mana Confluence. And then fetching, they go ahead and shock as well. So it looks like this is just going to be Escape Ox of Agonis. They don't have enough cards for Conflagrate to really do anything relevant. And we've already seen 3 creeping chills. So I know this can't chill me out. I just really need it to not find a whole bunch of Narcomoebas. Which they do end up finding 1. But 1 is fine. Alright. The no attack is pretty smart. So they're going to kind of win the long game. Alright, so I'll give everybody at home a chance to pause and come up with how many ways you can win the game from here. Spoiler alert, there's more than 1. And I think we took the appropriate line to showcase the deck. So, assuming we're not going to get a discard trigger off this Kroxa. Because, I mean, they did just dredge back 3 cards with Ox of Agonis. So, we're not going to get the 3 damage there. But, like, Battle Rage on Ox of Agonis is 12. They've got a total of 8 points of toughness. 2, 4, 5, 8. Yeah. So I'm representing essentially 12 trample plus 4 more is 16. Plus these 6 is 22. So I've got a decent chance of like clearing out enough damage. If they just single block, I can like Battle Rage the Kroxa, bolt them in the face. If they double block, like Narcomoeba, Stinkweed Imp, we can bolt a Stinkweed, bolt a Narcomoeba, Battle Rage the Kroxa for 12, Rin Ping them for lethal. If they triple block the Ox, or triple block the Kroxa, single block the Tarmogoyf, that's 3, 4, 5, 6 on here. We can Battle Rage the Kroxa, trample over for 6, double bolt them, Rin Ping, like, if they quad block the Kroxa, then that's 8 toughness on Kroxa. We Battle Rage the Kroxa, trample through for 4. They've got instant in the yard, so we don't go there. We trample over for 4, plus the Tarmogoyf is 8. We go bolt up to 11, bolt up to 14, they're dead. So long story short, like, they're going to die. We take somewhere in the middle ground of just like, oh, let's bolt the Ox out of the way, Battle Rage the Croxa, we'll deal 10 to them, and bolt for the last 3. So, whole bunch of options, but yeah, some way Battle Rage is yet again the key card in the matchup. Just being able to get up to those critical points of damage. Alright, so that is 2-0. And I believe this was a really fun match, so if this is the one I'm thinking about, then it's going to kind of showcase, like, why this go big idea is kind of nice. So we see Yorion on our opponent's side. Our 7, unkeepable with no lands. Our 6, pretty bad. Stomping Ground doesn't cast Inquisition or Thoughtseize. We are on the draw, but pretty unkeepable. Again, no lands, so we're down to 4. Our 4 is not bad. Like, we could keep 2 lands, Ragavan, Inquisition or something, and just try to get there. We could keep, like, 2 lands, Ragavan, Shadow. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to, throw back the Shadow. I'm not guaranteed to have it online, so I really don't want a card in my hand that isn't guaranteed to be online. But, you know, immediately we get rewarded with backup Shadow. So, Inquisition to try to take out anything that's going to kill this Ragavan. I could lead with Ragavan there, but if it's against a Yorion pile, the absolute worst case scenario for me is leading on Ragavan, and they just follow up with, like, Renin 6 on 2, down tick on the Ragavan. So, here I know about the Unholy Heat, so I'm just going to go ahead and cast the Croxa. Which, them discarding Unholy Heat makes me think that they have a second copy. But it could also mean, now that I think about it a little more, that they're putting me on, like, Jund mid-range and not Jund Shadow. So if they don't think I've got a whole bunch of, like, 1-mana dudes, then maybe them discarding Unholy Heat is their way of saying, like, I don't think Unholy Heat's going to kill anything. So we'll just dash Rag for the chip damage. Man, I wish this Lightning Bolt were a land so I could Prismatic Ending the Ren. But, oh well. I know they've got, or I took the Ice Fang Coatl. I know they got a Fury still. Teferi's a little rough. It's like now I can't fetch Shock and play my Shadow because they just Ren ping it. I could fetch Shock, bolt myself, play Shadow, but then Teferi just bounces it. And, like, all of these roads kind of lead to me not doing anything relevant. Like, I don't want to just play Death Shadow out into, oh, Teferi, bounce it, draw a card. But we're kind of getting to the point of the game where they've just got so much stuff going on that I don't think I can possibly outvalue all of it. And yeah, like, especially if they're drawing more Ice Fang Coatls. So anytime they get, like, removal spell plus draw a card on 1/2 mana body, that's probably not going to spell success for me. So Spyro ditches some stuff. And I just kind of decided to scoop it up here. Our opponent can, like, Ren ping tokens, Teferi bounce a token, whatever. I don't have any way of interacting with these Planeswalkers effectively. They've got this Fury that I know about that they can just hard cast this next turn and wrath my board. Like, no way I'm coming back from that. So I would rather, for sanity purposes, scoop and go to game 2. So sideboarding against the 4-color pile. We had a little bit of a discussion about this in the Discord, the Grimflare Discord, for anybody that's interested in asking about it or checking it out. Couldn't really decide what I wanted my sideboard plan ultimately to look like. Like, I knew I wanted to bring in the 2 copies of Turok. I knew I wanted to bring in the Grist. And I kind of wanted to bring in the K command just to play around like a little extra discard. Get back something like a Kroxa for an extra discard effect. Like, I felt like that might actually be relevant to my game plan. So I really wanted to bring in the 2 Turoks, the K command, and the Grist. I knew I wanted to board out the Temur Battle Rage. Lightning Bolt was a little bit iffy. Basically, it's not going to kill a Planeswalker that they play out, and let's say like minus for value, in which case I'm already behind. And then the last spot, we went down every card in the deck, and it was between like a Ragavan or board out an extra Renin 6, board out an extra like Inquisition or something, an Unholy Heap, but all those kind of seemed relevant. So we ended up deciding to try boarding out a Tarmogoyf, kind of like Jund used to do in the blue-white control matchups, where Tarmogoyf was just 2 mana, die to everything, get you no value when it enters. So we'll see how that performs for us. I was a little skeptical because I want my Tarmogoyfs in the deck. I want to provide pressure in the early turns. This hand is weird. So we're on the play. If we find a second land, then we open up everything. Like we can get Ren going. We can get Spyro to ditch extra Ragavans. We can get Kroxa going. So we've got a lot of really good cards in the matchup. Triple Ragavan's a little odd. So worst case scenario with this hand is our opponent plays, we play a Ragavan on 1. Our opponent plays like a Unholy Heat or Prismatic Ending on our Ragavan. We go to turn 2. We play out another Ragavan. And our opponent plays like Ren and down ticks. And we just don't see a second land. That's like worst case scenario. But usually matchups like this, I take the approach of I need my opponent to stumble somewhere. And if they don't stumble, the likelihood of me winning that match is like next to 0. If they just have a perfect hand of turn 1, like stomping ground for Veil of Summer or Unholy Heat into like turn 2 Ren, turn 3 Teferi, bounce my guy, turn 4 Omnath, like I'm never winning that game. So I'm going to take the approach of I don't think my opponent has a 1-mana removal spell. I think they kept a greedy hand. They got a bunch of big stuff. Let's do it. Ragavan survives. We're golden because now I can just like play Renin 6 on 2 and get back a land, play Spyro on 3, Kroxa, whatever. So paying cost, Ragavan's dead. Wait, that's not Ragavan dying. Please, all things just and holy, give us a second land for this Ren. Rewarded. So rewarded. So now we can get down Ren, ping their Ragavan, attack with ours. Like, we are ahead on tempo. We've got the Ragavan going. And opponent just scoops it up. Like, the 2-turn kill with a Ragavan. Easy. Assuming opponent was in a position where they just, like, either didn't have a follow-up. Maybe they kept a 1-lander like we did, and they were relying on that Ragavan to connect. But either way, I will take that one against 4-color pile. For all you 4-color pile pilots out there, like, you deserve a little bit of justice. You get to play everything with no issues, so every now and then you just got to take the L. I don't think I changed anything for game 3 in the sideboarding. Ooh. opening hand is pretty bad. Like, I can't cast Tarmogoyf. I don't have Hand Disruption. Can't cast Wrenn. Blind Croakson 2's not that exciting. So we're going to throw that back. This hand's not great either. I do have like an Unholy Heat if they play a Ragavan or something on one. Spyro might be able to draw me into some better stuff. But I really don't want to go down to 6 or go down to 5 against the deck that's just like all 2-for-1s. So I figure this hand can like grind a little bit. Might as well keep it. Turn 1 Abundant Growth isn't the worst. So we're just hoping to like dodge Wrenn 6 here, which we do. And now maybe we draw a good 2-drop. Nope. It's kind of funny because, like, based on the video title, you already know there's a trophy here. And somehow we turn this into a win. And it's just a matter of figuring out how we get from this point to that point over the course of the next, like, 1,000 turns. Like, oh yeah, nice little Fury on top. It's fine. Liliana's a great draw. But with double blue here, there's like no chance that this Liliana resolves. So we could go for Spyro or we can just jam Liliana. Because, like, again, just like game 2, the only way we're winning is if our opponent stumbles somewhere. So my hope here is they kept a hand that's like Omnaths and Solitudes, March of Otherworldly Lights, all that stuff, Prismatic Endings, like a very reactive hand. And I get to start playing like my 2-for-1s. So ditching Shadow here, kind of for the same reason that I ditched Tarmogoyf in the boarding process. Like, it's a 1-mana threat, that's great, but it doesn't do anything immediately. Like, you're just hoping to turn it into a clock. But we will absolutely K-command. Eladomri's Call is interesting because that means, like, I can Eladomri's Call for, like, a Shadow and play it out. Or we can Eladomri's Call for a Turok and plan on kicking that next turn. Like, our opponent showed that they didn't have a counterspell for our Liliana. Maybe they don't have a counterspell by now and we can just Turok. So, Omnath comes down. We do not currently have Delirium, but we're just missing Instant. So, if they don't do anything too scary this turn, we can, like, K-command, make them discard, get back Shadow or something, and then Unholy Heat the Omnath. Sorcery also gives us Delirium. So, occasionally you need some hot draws to win these matchups. But I get to Thoughtseize. They did have the fetch land, so they could have just, like, hard cast a Fury or a Solitude. Honestly, I think they should have just hard cast a Fury and had it on the board. But not my call to make. Either way, we're going to dash a Ragavan. I could have hard cast the Ragavan, but I really don't want my opponent just, like, hard casting a Solitude and getting rid of it. Even though I've got K-command and Turok and all this, I'd rather them, like, have to evoke the Solitude if they're going to use it. And if they're not, then I'm just going to kick Turok next turn, and they're not going to have a way of dealing with that. So Windswept Heath is gone. Now they've got Solitude, March of Otherworldly Light, Flooded Strand that I know about, and then an Unknown. They've not put Yorion into hand. So we're just going to kick Turok. And they drew a Lightning Bolt. Like, one of their few ways of actually answering the Turok. But we do get Solitude out of hand in the Flooded Strand. So now I know they've got March of Otherworldly Light and an Unknown draw off the top. Play Ragavan, because if they want to march this, power to them. Yep. So this is pretty nice. I could have, I guess, played around Counterspell there by going for like K command first, like make them discard, try to get back Turok. But I'm actually really happy with this because I would rather get back Turok anyway than resolve the Shadow. So we'll take that. It also means I get to like draw step K command them and get back the Turok. So if they do something like add Yorion to hand, I get to Turok it away. And of course they draw an instant speed spell. So, you know. Then they end up discarding an Endurance, which is nuts for me. They do not have the prerequisite double green mana to cast said Endurance, which I'm shocked that the 4-color pile deck got punished for their mana. And choosing not to put Yorion into play here, so I can't just like ditch it with the Turok, which I decided to just go ahead and play out as a 2/1 that dodges all of their interaction. But the top deck Ragavan, I really don't want that connecting, so I kind of have to trade. This is where it starts to get a little bit dicey because now I need like an answer to Yorion off of this Spyro. Plus if I don't find an answer to the Yorion, then it becomes like a 5-mana 4/5 flyer that draws a card because they've got the Abundant Growth in hand. So could have been better. Could have been a lot better, actually, because I still do not have an answer to the Yorion currently, which they don't play out, and I think that's like a pretty big indicator that their last card is Solitude. Like, I can't think of anything that you would hold on to and not play out outside of Solitude. So I should have attacked with just the Spyro right there. But I kept thinking, like, oh, I'm either attacking with both of them or none of them. I don't want to attack with both because they just Solitude, exile my Spyro, eat the token. But attacking with just Spyro would have been fine because if they wanted to block, or like exile the elemental, block the Spyro and trade off, like I would have been happy with that. But here, opponent, we know they've got a Yorion. They main phase attack with a Solitude, so we're just going to make tokens and pray to the Elden Gods that they don't have like a March of Otherworldly Light here to blow this out. But at the same time, if they have a March, it means that they can't play a Yorion this turn. Gives us another turn to potentially draw out of that. So here comes the Sky Noodle itself. Yep, draw your cards. Spyro, not the worst here. So best draws off of this Spyro would be like Unholy Heat to kill the Yorion, Liliana to downtick on the Yorion. We could get Croxa. We could get another Turok to get the hand empty. Something like that would be decent, but we really need to get this Yorion out of play. All right, so Croxa's really good. Let's get something out of hand. We get a snow-covered island, so kind of assuming that their last card is something live. I don't want to draw a Thoughtseize. I want to give myself the best chance of drawing like an Unholy Heat or something on their turn. Land is rough. All right, Michael, how on earth do you get out of this one? Your opponent's got a Yorion. You're at 6 life. You're dead to a Bolt. You're dead to Ren double down tick. You're dead to everything under the sun. Speaking of Ren, double down tick. I don't know why they didn't just down tick on us there, but you know. Alright, so Eladomri's call for an Omnath is obviously terrifying. Liliana. Okay. So we can start formulating something that maybe confuses a game plan here. We've got a Kroxa in the yard, a Liliana on board. So, like, we can Liliana take care of the Yorion so we're not dead. We can attack at the Ren and ping it with our Ren so we're not dead to that. We can escape Kroxa to exile the non-Omnath card that they have available, because there's no way they're ditching the Omnath, right? And now it's just, is there a best way to sequence this? I would recommend exiling or escaping the Kroxa first, because my opponent's got an Omnath. I know they have a green card. There's a chance that their last card is either an Endurance or a Solitude. And if I escape the Kroxa first, then they're going to have to either, like, fire off the Solitude if they want to go ahead and get that effect, and I get to gain a little bit of life and not be dead to the Yorion. Or they have to fire off the Endurance, but it's going to be after I get the Kroxa escaped and on the stack. So let's exile some jank. Get Kroxa, see what their last card is. We're assuming they're not discarding Omnath. So discard Ragavan. Makes sense. Let's tack down this Ren and ping it. Play our Liliana to get rid of the Sky Noodle. So we know their last card is Omnath. We've got a Kroxa that can attack next turn. So worst case would be like land, March of Otherworldly Light, Prismatic Ending, Solitude. Any of those would be... Ugh. But opponent letting us go to attacks is really good for us. So let's play out our Tarmogoyf. Ren pinging them in case we draw our last Lightning Bolt. We can present lethal. And here it's just we're at the mercy of their top deck. And we get there. So, as we can see, the Liliana was very relevant. The Kroxa, Ren was solid. Turok was great. Like, all of these 2-for-1 cards that we're kind of playing in this bigger variation. Seasoned Pyromancer was really good. All these cards that we're not playing in the traditional Shadow Shell all really showed out in this matchup. So, huge, huge win for the good guys. And on to round number 4. Again, really great hand. We are on the play this time for, I think, the first time today. We've got turn 1 Hand Disruption or Ragavan, turn 2 Ren and 6, or like double spell. Usually in the blind, I kind of advocate for just playing out the Ragavan on turn 1. It's the highest upside. If it lives, then I get to like double spell next turn with like Ren plus a 1-man interactive spell. And that's really nice for me. So if it doesn't die, or if it does die, I still get to like follow up with Ren. If they play out a Ragavan or a Dragon's Rage Channeler of their own, then I can just Ren ping it or Unholy Heat it and tick up Ren, whatever. Like, I've got a ton of options here, and I think Ren just like helps me get to the most options the quickest. Plus, if they're on something unfair, then getting the damage in sooner is a little bit nicer. So, Unholy Heat means this is probably a Murktide matchup. So, let's just go ahead and start ticking up Ren. It's like Ren Emblem with a Delirious Unholy Heat is a really great way for us to win. the post spell pierce Land of Shame, which I'm a little frustrated that I played into that. I just kept thinking it was like counter spell or bust. So that was absolute punt from me. All right, so Thoughtseize is a really great draw. Now I've got 2 lands for Spell Pierce. I don't have 4 lands for double Spell Pierce, you're right. And their hand is, as we would say in the business, kind of booty. We can just like freely take this Murktide. So they've got a Unholy Heat without Delirium. They've got a Fiery Islet for a redraw, but we've got Wrenn plus Peatland, so we can just like start drawing off that. And we're representing a Wrenn ultimate in a couple turns. If they do find Delirium here, which, spoiler alert, they do, they can kill the Wrenn, but we've just got Liliana of the Veil as a follow-up. And I know it's going to sound crazy, but Liliana of the Veil is a pretty decent follow-up in the Murktide matchup. But, yeah, we've got, like, live Liliana here. We've got double Unholy Heat with Delirium, so we can answer Murktide Regent very easily. We can answer any of the 1-mana threats. If they keep iterating, that's going to be a little annoying. So we'll let them Surveil, get their draw off Consider, or their loot off Consider, before we make any sort of moves. I really want them to Scry or Surveil, and Surveil again, and draw based on the assumption that their Dragon's Rage Channeler is living. Even though I know it's not living, that doesn't mean they have to know it's not living. Yuck. Counterspell. Would have loved to have seen like a an expressive iteration or something off the top of their library, but here we are. Either way, we've got a Lily upticking, we've got a Peatland to sacrifice. So I feel pretty good about this game so far. They've already gone through 2 Unholy Heats, 2 expressive iterations, a Murktide, 2 Dragon's Rage Channelers. It's like, we're doing a decent job of keeping up with their threats. Like, get rid of Spell Pierce, sure. And I should have bobbled them before I dashed the Ragavan. Because if I see something that I don't care about, like another land, I might want to just like cast the Ragavan and not attack and make one of their draws dead. But because I dash the Ragavan and I see their Ragavan, even though I don't really care about their Ragavan, I have to attack into it, because now if I don't, they get to untap, dash Ragavan, I can't stop it, and they just get like a free attack off of it. Whereas if I just hard cast my Ragavan, if I knew about theirs and I just hard cast mine, then I would know one of their 2 draws was dead. And unless the second draw is exactly a removal spell for my Ragavan, then I'm pretty okay with the way that that trade goes. So I thought that was going to be Dragon's Rage Chandler, Murktide, but opponent just decides to draw 2. They ditch the second Murktide, which I'm assuming is they don't think they can cast it. So if they can't cast it, it's just like playing into Lily downtick and downtick again next turn. And here it's like, are we battle raging a Ragavan? Heck yeah, we are. And a lot of this was because my opponent was like F6 during this turn. But Yet again, we're really good at hitting counter spells off Ragavan dashes. Not really what you want to be hitting. But opponent draws into Murktide plus a Lightning Bolt. So now they're able to get Lily down to where we cannot kill it. Or not sacrifice, make them sacrifice their Murktide. Hard cast out a Ragavan. And now if they attack Murktide at Liliana, which they kind of have to, or else we're just going to edict their Murktide next turn, it does open us up to the line of like drawing another bolt, Ragavan hitting them, hitting a bolt off of their library. We could hit another Murktide off their library and cast it. Expressive Iteration is live. Dragon's Rage Channeler's live. Unholy Heat's live. Like 95% of their deck is live for us to hit here and gain some sort of a significant advantage. Survey says land. So our like 5 Ragavan hits this game have been, I think, 3 lands, their Ragavan, double counter spell. We in the business would call that awful. So we're just going to fire the bolt off. Could make an extra 1/1 with Spyro, but this kind of means that if we miss, like if we drew poorly, they can't really attack because they're just dead on the crackback. So it buys us a little time. But we draw Kroxa, and Kroxa with the trigger is just lethal. So, yeah. You know, easy stuff. Sideboarding against Murktide. The 3 copies of Soul Guide Lantern. The 3 copies of Terminate the Grist. I think that's everything. So, like, Soul Guide, Soul Guide, Soul Guide, Terminate, 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 Grist. Oh, and Engineered Explosives. Boarding out the Inquisitions because they don't hit Murktide Regent. That's, like, 80% of our sideboard plan is what can we do to reduce or eliminate the possibility of losing the game to the card Murktide Regent. It's a very small likelihood that you're going to lose to their Ragavans or their Dragon's Rage Channelers. You just have a lot of ways to stand in front of those. You got a lot of great removal spells for them. But Murktide Regent specifically is a huge issue. So the Soul Guide Lanterns to kind of nuke the graveyard has the added benefit of reducing the damage on Unholy Heat, keeping Delirium off for Dragon's Rage Channeler, preventing them from casting Murktide Regent. If they have like Snapcaster Mage, it can subsequently stop that a bit. Mention the Inquisitions don't actually hit Murktide Regent. And then like the Ragavans, especially on the draw, are either going to get stonewalled by their 1-drops, or they've got like 4 bolts, 4 Unholy Heats to deal with all of your 1-drop dudes. Like Ragavan on the draw is just awful. Temur Battle Rage, they've got a ton of counter spells. They might have copies of things like Brazen Borrowers. They've got Unholy Heats, so relying on Battle Rage is a little sketchy. And then I'll board out a Wrenn and 6 on the draw, mainly for like counter spell, spell pierce, things like that. Hand is kind of dicey. If they've got turn 1 Ragavan, we're really, really behind because we're going like turn 1 EE. They get to hit us. They get up to 3 mana. They're double spelling. And all we're doing is like playing second lane and passing. So I'm going to ship this one back. If I was on the play, I might consider keeping this one because I can play like turn 1 EE, turn 2 hold up EE, turn 3 Spyro, something like that, and not feel too bad about it. This hand's worlds better. We've got an answer to Murktide in our opener. We've got an answer to the 1-drop threats. We can just ditch the bauble. So, really good mold decision on our part because they did end up having the turn 1 Ragavan. Decide to Unholy Heat instead of Bolt because I'm not getting Delirium online like anytime soon. Thoughtseize first because I really want to resolve this Soul Guide Lantern. Counterspell, yep. And then decide to exile the Ragavan instead of the Counterspell. Exiling Counterspell can shrink Murktide, but if I've got Soul Guide Lantern, they're just like not casting Murktide, and I'm going to exile it anyway. But exiling the Ragavan means they're a little bit less likely to have Delirium online. Because, like, they're probably going to have another instant. They're probably going to have another land. They've got sorceries with Serum Visions and Expressive Iteration. But they're not going to have another creature, like, until I decide that they're going to have another creature. So, no real fear of hand disruption, so we can go ahead and crack the Bauble right away. Looks like Archmage's Charm, yep. Alright, so we're getting a little clunked up here. Would not mind finding another land. And I got to keep an eye on graveyard count for what's the name? Murktide Regent. They do decide to just like go ahead and fire off all this stuff on their main phase, which I'm really happy about because this is just more stuff that's filling up their graveyard. Then I don't need to crack Soul Guide yet. I can wait and see what I draw. All right, so sequencing here. If my opponent goes to crack this Misty Rainforest, I am sacking the Soul Guide Lantern, like 100%. Because if they want to Unholy Heat the Grist, then I want to exile their graveyard so they're not actually killing it. That being said, I do not have a great opportunity to. I could just like aggressively Soul Guide before I cast the Grist, and that could very well be right, but I kind of wanted to give them the chance of fetching and me being able to exile this Misty Rainforest as well. But as soon as they don't, I go for the Soul Guide. They do have the Unholy Heat. So, little unfortunate, but at the end of the day, I'm kind of glad because I do just get to nuke the yard. Make sure that if they have a Murktide, it's pretty tame. And here's the really hope you don't have Counterspell. So bait with the Death Shadow there, because I think they're a lot more likely to counter that than the Spyro. Or, I think I would rather them counter the Shadow than the Spyro. I think they're more likely to counter the Spyro, but if they don't think I have a follow-up, then they might not go for it. So, opponent grabbing 17 basic islands here makes me believe they likely have Blood Moon in their deck now, which isn't really like a shocker by any means, but all right. So if they just play like a big Murktide here, I'm in a lot of trouble. Instead, they Fury. I don't know if Fury is a card I would bring in this matchup. Like, typically, I'm getting Shadow too big for like Unholy Heat anyway, and you're going down a card to cast the Fury. So, like, Fury is probably not dealing with Tarmogoyf or Death Shadow very often. And this is probably, like, GG's. Them having the Jace here unanswered. Like, I get back Spyro tokens. I can kind of pressure Jace a microscopic bit. But I think the only way I'm going to have a chance here is to, like, draw something pretty relevant that turn. which we do not. That means that they get to brainstorm yet again. Kill my shadow, play a Murktide. And yeah, I'll scoop it up to the Murktide. If they didn't have a follow-up and they had to attack with a Channeler, maybe I could keep playing a little bit. But as soon as they have Murktide to just like sit back and block a token and swing in for lethal next turn, then that is GG's. But get to go on to a lovely game 3. Opening hand's great. We've got a couple lands. We've got a couple spot removal spells. We answer Murktide. We've got Spyro to kind of refuel the hand a little bit. Just hoping to get a tempo advantage with them playing a 1-drop, which, God, they're so smart and thin. They don't do. One thing people ask about all the time is like deciding how aggressive you want to be with your life total. And I don't have a good answer for it. It's really all about feel. For this situation here, like I didn't want to fetch and shock on turn 1 because I wanted to give myself the opportunity to like draw base or fetch basic swamp early or later if I wanted it. I also didn't know if they were going to have a really aggressive hand of like turn 1 Channeler, turn 2 Channeler, Bobble, Serum Visions or something, and I would want to be more conservative with my life total. So all I can say is like 9 times out of 10, if you don't have to fetch and shock, I probably wouldn't. Like if I delay this decision a little bit longer, I can still do it. I can still fetch and shock and lower my life total, but I can make a decision based on what I've drawn. Like maybe my next 2 draws are Thoughtseize, and now I want to Thoughtseize first and then decide to fetch and shock, and like Thoughtseize again and then decide if I want to fetch and shock and play out Shadow. But if I go ahead and fetch and shock for no reason, now I'm getting into a situation where like, what if I Thoughtseize and I see Bolt, Snapcaster, Bolt, Murktide, Expressive Iteration. Like, I've set myself up to fail before anything's even happened just because I made myself lose a ton of life for effectively no value. And especially with this Spyro here, allowing me to like ditch this extra, or ditch the shadow if I don't want to be too aggressive. Like, I've got choices here. Why would I want to ruin those by just playing out things? Or just making actions that I don't need to make. So they do have Spell Pierce for the Soul Guide. I could have like led on the Soul Guide, and that probably would have been a lot better. Just lead on the Soul Guide. They're less likely to Spell Pierce it when I've got 2 lands open. And then after that, follow up with Tarmogoyf. But I was kind of thinking they had Counterspell, and I wanted them to counter the Tarmogoyf so I could resolve the Soul Guide and stop the Murktide. So I think that's like 2 or 3 times this match that I've really wanted my opponent to have the card Counterspell. And instead, they've had Spell Pierce, and it's been pretty bad for me. Like, I still think I would rather play around Counterspell than Spell Pierce, because we know they're on, like, 4 Counterspell. They're maybe on, like, 1 or 2 Spell Pierce. So, Unholy Heat my Shadow, sure. I will Unholy Heat your Ragavan. So this is kind of a fun spot. Like, I get a Spyro with a bunch of tokens. You've got a Blood Moon with 1 card in hand. Draw a Bauble and see I'm okay trading off Shadow for Ragavan here. Like, I've just got the pressure. You're at a precarious life total. If your last 2 cards are like Murktide on top, Island in hand or something, I'm in really rough spot. But their top card's Archmage's Charm. So I think there's a good chance that my opponent is just Blood Moon themselves out of the game. And that is the case. So, yeah, like, Blood Moon is a good Magic card. No argument. Blood Moon is a pretty good card against Death Shadow decks. No argument. Blood Moon is really, really, really bad if you don't have board presence before it, and I do. So, if you get into a situation like this, if you're a Murktide player and you've got a Blood Moon and you're all hype about it because it's going to shut down your Shadow opponent, like, make sure you got a Murktide out or the board clear or something. And if you don't, just start sacking these islets. Like, find relevant stuff. Find a Murktide. You find a Murktide here, you're relevant. Like, you don't know that I've got Terminate, but Murktide's a whole lot better than Blood Moon. Just don't hinge your entire game on casting Blood Moon and assuming that wins you the match. All right, so match 3, or match 5. God, numbers are tough. We've got an opening hand that's pretty decent. We've got a redraw for a land. We're on the play. We've got hand disruption. We've got threats. So I think I'm going to keep it, looking for the land. See, Hangerback Walker on the top of their library, which is pretty clear indicator of like Hardened scales. And Shocker. We are, in fact, up against Hardened scales. I did make a choice here that maybe looking back is incorrect. I ended up taking the Hardened scales, and I think I could have just taken the Welding Jar and been okay, but I was like, oh, Hardened scales grows the Tarmogoyf. If they do happen to find the green source, it's like scariest card that they've got access to. But I probably could have just like taken the Welding Jar and been fine killing Zabaz. Because I knew they weren't drawing a green source next turn, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But at the same time, like, I'm kind of okay with this because this is a very slow progression that my opponent's got going on. I do get to put some decent pressure on. Second Welding Jar is a little not so slow. Second removal spell on my side is great. So now this bolt will give me Delirium. So I can like double removal spell here. If they decide to block with the construct token, then I can like throw a bolt at something. It does grow the Tarmogoyfs. So we can go like bolt on the Hangerback Walker. Adds instant to the yard to grow the Tarmogoyf. In this case, it added creature as well. So we get in a nice bigger attack. We're just going to Unholy Heat to go ahead and start knocking out Welding Jars. All right. Whole bunch of stuff going on this turn. As soon as the opponent doesn't make another construct token, like, you figure they're going to have a pretty decent turn. They end up getting Zabaz off of the... Or no, they got Saga off of the Urza's... Shadow Spear off the Urza Saga. Zabaz was their draw for turn. They're going to go ahead and get in like a reasonably chunky lifelink swing here. I've got a Shadow, so I've got like relevant follow-up. We're just going to crack in with Tarmogoyfs because like I need to get them low enough to where I can present lethal if they decide not to attack. They do have this welding jar for the construct token if they want to attack in, just gain a bunch of life. Okay, so thought process here. Before we get to this attack step, I had to think about life total for like a while. I could have just fetched up a swamp and played a seasoned pyromancer, but I would have been giving away Death Shadow, which is like chunkiest dude I've got access to, especially right now. We could have fetched up basic swamp and Thoughtseize, but we would have gone down to 2 off of that, which means I could just re-equip Shadow Spear to the Thopter token and swing in for lethal. We could Thoughtseize and not play the Shadow, but then we're just forced into chump blocking this Construct token. And they could, like, if we double block and they regenerate the Construct token, they gain a bunch of life. Like, we lose a Tarmogoyf. If we have a Summoning Sick Death Shadow the next turn, not really a good way to turn that back around. If we play out this Shadow, now we have the option to block the Construct token. If they animate both of their Ink Moth Nexuses, then the Construct grows to a 9. We can, like, fetch and outgrow the Construct token. Gets a little dicey, but we have a little bit of life to work with. Instead, they decide to attack all, which means we just have like a free block on this Construct token. So if they animate an Ink Moth or something to grow this, like they could animate both Ink Moths. The Construct grows to a 9/9. These 2 will deal damage to us, put us down to 3. This will deal 9 to the Shadow. The Shadow grows to 10. And we get to keep Shadow double Tarmogoyf for the crackback. They would gain 9, go to 15, but we would have 22 swinging back at them. They can take this block or like make a construct, make this an 8/8, gain 8, go to 14, have a construct, and we're not presenting lethal on the crackback if that's the case. So I think that's probably like best line for them here. But instead, they animate an Ink Moth because I'm assuming they believe this Shadow is going to trade off with the Construct token. However, as all of you big brain people on YouTube know that play Death Shadow, this damage from the Zabaz and the Thopter token are going to do 2 to us at the same time that this Construct deals damage to Death Shadow. State-based actions are going to check after combat damage is done and see, oh, we're now at 3 life. This Shadow's a 10/10. It's only got 8 damage marked on it, so Shadow's going to live. And that's exactly what happened. And opponent does not Welding Jar there, which if you wait until after combat damage, it's too late. If they sack the Welding Jar before combat damage, then the Construct would have shrunk by 1. They would have had to like sack or animate their other Ink Moth Nexus, but it still wouldn't have killed the Shadow. So ultimately, opponent's gonna wait for a moment, play out an Automaton. So now all we got to do is like find an answer to the Automaton. We can fetch out basic swamp with this, so I don't need to like fetch beforehand. And that is it. So now we can Unholy Heat the Automaton, pay for ward, swing in with Chunky Gentleman. So they could have regenerated the Automaton, but the way regeneration works is if that thing is destroyed, it's tapped and removed from combat. So it would have tapped down the Automaton. We still would have had the same attack through for lethal. Game numero dos. Sideboarding against Hardened Scales Affinity. Ragavan's pretty bleh. I like keeping in a couple because like there are times that you can out-tempo if you get a Ragavan and they have an early turn of like turn 1 dude you kill, turn 2 like Walking Ballista or what's his name, Arcbound Ravager or something like that you get to kill plus play Rin. It's not too likely, but it is relevant. The Lilianas are probably not going to hit what you want to hit. They're probably going to have multiple creatures out on the board. And then it's really awful against things like Hangerback Walker. Inquisitions, I usually board out a couple hand disruption spells because they're just like getting out on the board so quickly. Ragavan's a lot better on the play. Seasoned Pyromancer's a little slow and clunky. Kroxa, I think, is a little slow. It's not the worst, but I don't think it's playing to the board or to the hand as quickly as you want it to. Boarding in like 2 copies of Ancient Grudge because artifact. 2 copies of Alpine Moon for Urza's Saga. 3 copies of Terminate just to deal with anything that gets big, as well as like Arcbound Ravagers. Any Ravager that like modulars onto something, I need to be able to kill it regardless of how big it gets. 1 copy of Engineered Explosives because go wide, token deck. They also play a really high amount of like annoying 1-drops like Patchwork Automaton. Or not Automaton. Arcbound Worker, Hardened Scales, the module, animation module, Ozolith, like all those I'd love to be able to wipe out. And then 1 copy of Kolaghan's Command because, hey, 2-for-1 cards are 2-for-1. So, opening hand, we've got a Bolt on the draw. We've got a K Command. So, I think this is like a reasonable hand. I've got a couple, or a 2-for-1. Spyro can ditch away some extra lands or something. Draw us into some relevant things. Sea Bobble on top, which I really don't want. So, what I would like to avoid this turn is my opponent having the card Patchwork Automaton. That is not a Patchwork Automaton. This card actually scares me a little more than it should right here. Because if they just follow it up with like a Hangerback Walker or something like Hardened Scales Hangerback. Yeah, Ozolith Hangerback, whatever. Then I can see this card like really getting out of control really quickly. Arcbound Ravager means that I've got pretty free like K Command, kill the Ravager, kill the Ozolith on my turn. I think I was too aggressive with my life total here. I think I know I was setting up Spyro, but I think I just could have played like basic Swamp and K Commanded. Because I think all I'm doing here is like making this Goblin Bombardment better than it should be. This was a tank for like 10 minutes turn. So I could like Lightning Bolt the Hangerback, play the EE on 0, crack it, and just try to get him to like throw all this damage at me so I could play out Shadow. So it would have been Lightning Bolt, target the Hangerback. They sack it to Bombardment, deal 1 to me, I'm at 13. EE, sack the EE. I take 2 more off their 2 Thopter tokens, sacking to Bombardment. And then I play out a 2/2 Shadow. Or, yeah, 2/2 Shadow, I'm at 11. They've got Urza Saga token and Ink Moth that they could like make a token, animate Ink Moth, sack them both to Bombardment, kill my Shadow. And I probably should have just said I'm fine with that and let them spend like the Construct, the Nexus, the Hangerback, and just get rid of my Shadow, EE, and Bolt, and then I could follow up with Seasoned Pyromancer afterwards. But I decided to Spyro, and I figured I could just, like, Spyro, hold on to Bolt for the Hangerback in case they went to, like, activate it or something. But the reason this was a pretty big mistake is I have to now fetch and shock with this Lightning Bolt to deal with the Hangerback Walker on their turn if they, like, go to activate it or something. And that makes this series of turns really, really awkward. So I know they can animate or activate the walker and put a counter on it here. But if they activate the walker, it means they can't make a construct off Urza Saga. So I think they're more likely to just like let this die. And if they let this die, I can EE on my turn and clear up the tokens or like force them to point damage and stuff. I did not think about Zabaz there. Sacking to the bombardment and modularing on the hangerback walker. Because now they get to just have the extra tokens. I think ultimately it's like a pretty similar situation. And then they go ahead and do the Urza Saga right there, which I don't know why they decided to sack the Urza Saga like that aggressively on their main phase. But it means that I do get to just clear up all these tokens. Unfortunately, this fetch and shock is like coming back to bite me because I'm taking 4 here just to get these tokens off the board. I know that they can make another construct here. They still have Ink Moth, so I'm still looking at like 2 more damage. I don't have my basic swamp anymore, so if I want to terminate something, I have to fetch and shock. And like all in all, I just think I did way too much damage to myself. And then here I decided to fetch and shock the construct token. And I don't think I needed to. I think I could have just gotten like a tapped fetch land, gone to my turn. Or tap shock land, gone to my turn, and terminated the Arcbound Ravager on my turn. It was like I'd be able to Spyro when it got back around, so I could clear up the board pretty well from any like big construct or like chump block any big construct pretty well. I don't think I needed to terminate right there. But now I'm like, oh, I've got an answer to the Arcbound Ravager. So if they go like modular a bunch of stuff, it means that they're not Goblin bombarding me. But Ballista is just lethal. So now if I kill this, they get to put the counters on the Ozolith. They can sack it to Goblin Bombardment and shoot me for 2 with Ballista. Like, I think I just played that entire game like really, really poorly. I should have respected Goblin Bombardment more. I had plenty of opportunities to be more conservative with my life total and just didn't. And I had a few opportunities to be more proactive with keeping the board clear, like that first Spyro turn. And opted instead to go for the value Spyro instead of just like clearing out the board, getting a shadow on board, making like throw a bunch of extra creatures at the shadow if they wanted to deal with it. But game 3, back on the play. I decided to board out the 3rd Ragavan. I think I'd boarded out 2 in game 2. And I brought back in the 2nd Croxa on the play. Mainly because of, like, Goblin Bombardment. Like, I don't want that card just stonewalling all of my Ragavans. This opening hand's pretty solid. We've got turn 1 Unholy Heat. We can Ancient Grudge any big dudes. We've got Heat, Goyf, or Heat, Mishra's Bauble, Fetch Land. Start growing Tarmogoyf. See a Verdant Catacombs on top. I decided to keep that so that I can not only tap or fetch up a tapped shock land with this Wooded Foothills, but I can also guarantee my 3rd land drop to be able to get down the Spyro. So, tap shock land, no reason on being too aggressive with my life total. Play out the Tarmogoyf off the Stomping Ground so that I can get basic Swamp off the Verdant Catacombs. Again, be conservative with my life total. But opponent has kept a 1-lander, which is amazing for me, because if they're just playing like 1-for-1s into Unholy Heat, Ancient Grudge, all this, like, I'm more than happy with that. So we go ahead and take out the animation module to get instant in the yard, grow the Tarmogoyf. I thought about into turning the Ancient Grudge here. Ultimately decided not to, because it would take instant out of my yard, shrink the Tarmogoyf, and I can always just like respond to them casting a creature with Ancient Grudge to take out the drum. So I don't feel like there's a huge need for me to do that super aggressively. But we'll just play out the Shadow so I can hold up Unholy Heat plus Grudge. And then here decided to just take out the Springleaf Drum so they can't Welding Jar it and get extra mana this turn. And then go ahead and Unholy Heat, because I would like to get this Spyro down with as few like irrelevant cards in hand as possible. Ozolith is definitely the scarier card here. Like, Patchwork Automaton at the moment with no artifacts in hand is just a 2-mana chump blocker. So I'm not overly scared of that. Keep up the Blood Crypt in case I draw into another copy of Hand Disruption. So I could pass the turn with Unholy Heat and like Unholy Heat the Hangerback Walker on their turn. But if they draw a land and they get to go like play land, cast Patchwork Automaton, hold up activating the Hangerback, it makes my life a lot worse. So we're just going to go ahead and main phase kill that. They play Automaton. That's fine. And Ren is a fantastic draw because now I just got to start pinging stuff off. I could pay for the ward on Patchwork Automaton with the Ren, but with my triple attackers, they have to double block or they're just dead to Ren ping next turn. Or no, they're just dead, period, if they don't double block. So I know both of these have to chump. Like, if they block Tarmogoyf, it's 6. If they block Shadow, it's 7. If they block Spyro, it's 9. So they have to block 2 creatures. And they decided to just let it through. I guess they decide, like, if they are giving the double chump block here, they're not winning this game. So I respect it. And that gets us to the 5-0. So again, here's the deck list. Are there any changes that I would make going forward? Tough one. Like, out of the cards I played that league, there's really nothing that I would have considered like didn't have a specific purpose. Ancient Grudge is a card that I have not historically been a huge fan of. Like, obviously it was nuts there when we play against Hardened scales, and it can be very relevant if there's more like Asmo food decks showing up. If Hammer Time is really on your radar, Ancient Grudge is solid. Grist is a little underwhelming out of the sideboard. Like, it's good in matches against like Murktide. It's good in mid-range mirrors, 4-color mirrors, stuff like that. But overall, I don't think it's it's not like a 3-mana card that you drop on turn 3 and gets you, like, claws you back into a game you're behind. Like Liliana, you can play on turn 3 and take out a Murktide Regent right there. Grist, you can't do it by itself. You have to like play a Grist with something on the board, sack that something. So it might just be too many extra steps to get the value from it. But I do like the card in decks with like Kroxa, because if you flip over a Kroxa off a Grist, it's god tier. So those would be like the 3 slots that I'm iffiest on at the moment. Maybe I want like a second copy of Engineered Explosives over the Grist. I could see that. If you want Veil of Summer, I guess you could technically play that, but I haven't really felt a big need for it. In the main deck, the Lilianas are probably the card that I board out the most outside of Ragavan. But Liliana is so great in like the 4-color matchup, in blue-white control matchups, and Murktide matchups that I really don't want to cut those just because those decks are so relevant right now. They're a lot worse against like anything going wide where you're not going to get to sack a specific thing on their side. But I don't think those kind of decks are as popular as like Murktide. Like, you're going to see Murktide basically every single league that you queue up on Magic Online. So having a really solid main deck continual value threat against Murktide is lights out. But yeah, that's about where I'm at right now with this list. We'll probably play it on stream early this upcoming week. So if you want to check that out live, it's twitch.tv/the_control freak. CNTRL freak. It should be like the same spelling as the YouTube channel. But we'll be playing this league or this week. We'll probably be playing like some Murktide Shadow. Try to find some stuff to sprinkle in between. But yeah, hope to catch y'all there. I will check you out when you show up. Until then, have an awesome rest of your day.